Welcome to Three Thoughts Song. Welcome back. Thank you, those of you who are still here from the previous conversation. Those of you who are live online, thank you for being here with us. Today we have Jefre as my guest here. Thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Rafael. Thanks. Honestly, I'm tired. It's been just a whirlwind. I literally rolled in with a suitcase, just sat down, and honored to be here today to speak to you in my hometown of Lake Nona.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I know who you are. A lot of people in the audience know who you are, but for those online who don't, can you tell us a little bit about you and how did you end up becoming this icon you are today?
Well, I guess really short story, really quick. I was a 9-to-5er doing still design, urban design and planning in Chicago for a big firm called SOM. Actually working on as-built for for a rail yard that then is now Millennia Park in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Had a heart attack at 35, triple bypass surgery, cashed out my 401k, and decided to not go back to art school. I just said, I'm going to do these competitions that were around the nation called 1% for Art, which 15 years ago just started where cities were actually funding art through 1% of capital projects. So when you would go to an airport or a city hall or arena, all the artwork that you see there is through this 1% for Art. And so 200-300 people apply. It's a design competition. I was a finalist on 12 in my first year. You wish to win one. I won 8 in my first year.
Wow.
And I was the fastest emerging artist to break the $1 million mark in my first year. And the reason for that is because at the time, I wasn't really a studios artist. I was really creating site-specific artwork that define the city or the place I was within. And so for me, it wasn't art about me, but it was art about the people. And so that's really why I won. And then I started doing my own studio work, had my very first art exhibit. Typically, the route of the artists is usually go through art fairs, art shows, group shows at a museum, a single show. My first show was at a 10,000 square foot exhibit at the Orlando Museum of Art. That was because of COVID. They had artists. I was going to actually have a small exhibit there, and they had said because of COVID, we had other artists not be able to have work because some museums were open, some weren't. So the work was sort of in transition and stuck in some areas. And so I said, how many galleries do you want me to fill? He said 4. I said, wow. I'll fill them all. And so from there, for me, I decided to say, I wanted to be the guy that created the next Eiffel Tower, the next Statue of Liberty, the next Arc de Triomphe, the next Bean. The idea of my artwork becomes skylines to cities. And Lake Nona here has been a great test subject. Tavistock Group have been very generous and open to sort of collaborative ideas. And it started with the garage, which is known as the ones and zeros and the beacons. And originally the garage was already designed with precast, very traditional, and they wanted me to put an artwork on there. And I said, or an art piece or sculpture, and I said, there's nothing I can do to hide this ugly garage. I said, give me the skin and the corner of the garage, and it is what it is today, which is the beacon garage with the ones and zeros, a binary code that spell out the missions and goals of Tavistock. You can see it translated, there's words in there. The corner is a stethoscope. If you look in plan view, you can see actually the cord, the 2 planters represent the earpieces. And then if you look in the stethoscope piece, you could see the EKG. That was the EKG when I had a heart attack at the time.
Oh, wow.
And then obviously the dog, which is very famously the community mascot of the community, which originally was going to be a cow.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. It's going to be a giant cow. And Jim Zaboro, who was the project manager or the principal here at the time, wanted to do a dog, and it was a lab, and we thought it was probably more, I wanted to do something that when all these fields go away, what was here before. So So the dog actually works well. It's the most selfie thing in the community. On the other corner, we were supposed to, where the Starbucks was, we were supposed to have a cat. So you have cats and dogs. Again, trouble with all the cat owners, but hopefully we can get a cat in here. But then the garage here at the Wave Hotel, which is Braille. So Braille is sort of a tactile, but if you take it in a visual form, the circles there all create letters as well, the same mission words that are on here. If you look at the little holes that glow at night, those are actually spaces. So like if you're playing Scrabble, those in between those spaces are actually words, and then you can actually sort of decode them yourself. And then our third garage, hopefully when that comes online, will be Morse code. So it'll be like dashes and dots, you know. So there's these language garages that become these very white kind of boxes that then when we have these districts can say, hey, where is, you know, this is sort of the sort of the movie district or the other kind of districts, or the hotel district and stuff like that. So they become wayfinding elements, and so that's been my story. I've been a resident of Orlando for about 20 years, and only started working here because of the fact that I was doing a lot of stuff worldwide, overseas, and so my biggest sculpture right now is 28 stories tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty in my homeland, called the Victor. And then next week, June 12th, we'll be launching the world's largest heart, which is in Tradition, Florida. So it's 7 stories tall, like the St. Louis Arch in the form of a heart. You can go in the middle of it, and we'll actually have, I think, 10 to 12 couples that will be out there to renew their vows or actually get married at the heart, and that we were going to get it dedicated then. So,
And all this started after your heart attack.
after all that lechon.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you for the background. It's I find it interesting. You know, I did a little bit of reading about you and what you do, and I found it interesting how, and you mentioned it in your introduction, how you take your art as a function of where it's going to go, right? As opposed to the other type of artists who they're just feeling something maybe internal to them, or something that's maybe associated with their past or whatnot, but it's personal. It seems like for you, you're trying to take whatever it is that you're inspired by and actually but put it in a function of the community where it's going to live in. Was that always the case, or did you eventually got to that place with your art?
Well, you have to remember my beginnings was in sort of urban design and planning, so it was really more about context and placemaking, this idea of where we would locate the moments, and now I wanted to do the moments, right? And so these moments are really not necessarily about me, they're about the community. And so the word public art is really about the public. It's actually engaging the public of what kind of art they want there that represents them, you know? So when you see like Jesus Redeemer, you know there's something related to that aspect of the people in Rio de Janeiro, right? Or the Eiffel Tower, you know, or the Statue of Liberty, which was a gift, you know. So I think those are very similar to the processes that I go through to kind of help generate a form that's also not only functional, but becomes iconic and becomes the skyline to the cities.
You have a number of pieces in the sculpture garden here by the Wave Hotel, and you tend to use angles, a lot of angles in those pieces. Is that how you've always done your art, or is again something that you kind of transitioned into as you developed your craft?
So when I had my first exhibit here, you can see at the Orlando Museum of Art on screen, that's when I can explore my studio work. It was about, did anyone get to see the show at the Orlando Museum of Art? We had a room, a gallery related to my journey about immigration. One gallery that related to my issues with heart disease. And then the other gallery that related to public art. And for me, as a public artist, as I said, it's not about me, but the people. And cities are not necessarily created by buildings. but the emotions that are occupying all those buildings. So all these sculptures that you see in the Wave Garden, or these fractal forms with the box heads, was my first studio work. And the fractal, which is that angular things, is really what you call points of connection. So as a landscape or urban designer and planner, the contours were actually originally not curvilinear. They were all triangulated in these tin models that had topographic points. And so the topographic points then just became smooth and curvilinear based on humans actually drawing point to point, right, in a smooth line to do contour and drainage. So for me, I took the basic form of that, which are these angular points, and that becomes the human forms. And the human forms with the box heads, the boxes are really substitutes for buildings. So when you see the names of these sculptures like joy, emotion, love, empowerment, faith that you see in the garden, with the head on the building, those are representative of emotions that I see that make a great city. Because when you put all the box heads on a horizon line, it makes a skyline of a beautiful city of emotions. And then I just continue on that vocabulary as I go to new cities of these different emotions. That's why these emotions are named based, these sculptures are named based after different emotions.
Very interesting. So you mentioned your homeland, right? So you're from the Philippines?
From the Philippines, yes.
Is that correct?
Filipino American, yes.
Yeah. And did you find yourself, as you go into your creative process, drawing from your homeland as you try to manifest a new piece of art?
Well, it's interesting because as I started getting known here in the U.S., corporations and businesses and people in the Philippines started getting notice of the work I'm doing here. And I only started going back there maybe 10 years ago. And the last time I was there was when I was 2 years old. Okay. So my memory of the Philippines was living in a very, what's the word I could say, not very affluent area where we would take a bath with a tub of water and they call it a tabo, you know. I remember us hunting for goats and pigs, and it was very not, it was very like, then your parents move here to find the American dream, right? And so, when I first got asked to go back there, I was like, how are they going to pay me? Are they going to pay me with rice or, I mean, it was very naive. And then I go to the Philippines and it looks like Manhattan, right? Yeah. And so my job was then you could see these works here on the screen, was to figure out what it means to be a Filipino again. As a Asian American grown here, raised in the States, I mean, I was trying to fit in. I was actually anti-Asian. I was not anti-Filipino, but anti-Asian. I was actually trying to fit in as much as I can because of the suburban community that my parents raised us all in, and trying to fit in with what was normal there. I was not only the only Filipino in our school. Me, my brother, my sister were the only minorities in our school. And so you were very anti-culture, I guess, of where you're from. And my book that's coming out this year really talks about, it's called Points of Origin, coming back home, and sort of my origin story. So it takes me to this idea where I started rediscovering my roots and where I am, and it led me to creating the Victor, which is a 28-story sculpture that you see here. At the bottom, it's polished mirror stainless, kind of like the bean, so you see your reflection, and as you go up, it goes to perforated metal. And so at about 5 o'clock, you actually can see the sun coming through the middle of the heart. And the arm at the top represents not Manny Pacquiao, our famous boxer, although he's going to be dedicated to this. It represents the global Filipino, the idea that no matter if you're looking for the American dream, the European dream, whatever, when you immigrate, don't forget where you're from, what your roots from, and that there's a beacon for you to come back here to kind of celebrate you and to take the knowledge that you learned abroad and bring it back home. And so it's interesting because if you go back to the Philippines, I am the guy that's now all these giant sculptures that are 28 stories, 9 stories, 12 stories are all popping up through the cities. And I'm changing the skyline and actually helping bring us back onto the world map.
Does it give you, you've done, when you look at the work that you've done a variety of different sizes, right? So you have these 28-story things, and then you have the dog over here, which is, pretty sizable as well. But you've also done smaller things. What takes you, well, obviously the larger ones are for urban development, right? So that's probably has to do with a particular project or a particular situation in any given city. But do you get different sources of inspiration as a function of whether you're going to do something small versus something larger?
Well, obviously it depends on the site, right? But more or less it's interesting because the traditional artist does things in a very small, compact nature, and then one day get a big sculpture. I kind of reversed that model, and I did the big ones, and then now going small, right? It's interesting because my show at the Orlando Museum of Art was in LA was called XLS, extra large small. So I would take all the large versions and make them small, like you see here. And this was at Basel, Paris. You could see the smaller versions that I make. And so it's one of those things where I wanted to also be able to have people be able to touch and have something in their home that was the larger than life but smaller that they can bring to their home, and let art be attainable for everyone. And that's where I'm at. It's kind of a tricky line right now because I don't want to necessarily sell out. I guess I don't know what that word sell out is, right? I want my work to be able to be in everyone's hands, and signing in with a new manager. He's one of the sharks on the Shark Tank, and he's making all these licensing deals for me, and it's great to see like opportunities where my miniatures can be on game boards like Monopoly or something like that. But I'm like, wow, is that too much, or where's that line? Because if my dream is still to one day be in the Louvre or the Met, or sell a balloon like a bunny rabbit, like the same mirror stainless bunny rabbit that's 18 inches tall for that Jeff Koons has sold for 91 million.
Yeah.
How do I still keep that path without feeling that my work is not as exclusive anymore? And art is subjective, as you know, right? In terms of how people feel about it and what people want to buy and purchase it for.
Yeah, no, you just reminded me. When you said that you went from large to small, it's like the opposite. You're right. I'm a big fan of Dali, and when you go to St. Petersburg and you see the museum, his first works were actually quite small.
Yeah.
And then he ended up with those giant canvases, right? Do you what role does technology play in the creation of your art? Obviously, you need tools, to build these giant things. But in the world today, I mean, everybody is being impacted by, AI and all the various things that are available to us. Are you using that, or are you more traditional with the way you construct your art?
Well, similar to some architects like Zaha Hadid and Frank Gehry, like. The thing is, as a artist, I'm not necessarily there laying brick by brick to make the Sphinx or some granular thing. I have a team, right? Obviously, and it's really in the age of where the technology has allowed me to move and bend materials in a way that is still beautifully aesthetic, but then can stand up to a Category 3 hurricane, right? So, because of the scale of my work, or even if it's smaller, there's always life safety in terms of the things that we do. I mean, the old artists would sit there and weld and weld and weld and say, it's just strong enough, right? I go into a city, and the first thing I get from the building permit is like, what is the wind load calculations for that arm? I'm like, what? So a lot of the stuff that I start with is engineering, and then using technologies to kind of figure out. It's interesting, I'm doing a sculpture now for the New Moors Hospital, you'll see here. It's a 40-foot elephant sculpture, kind of like the dog, but an elephant with an umbrella. It was funded by Allen Ginsberg. But we had to calculate the wind load of the umbrella so that it doesn't fall
Fly off.
or fly off or I don't want to be like, hey, have you ever been hurt by sculpture? Morgan and Morgan. We're like in a litigious area that you have to kind of figure out how to protect yourself, right? So, but yeah, using AI in a way for me, I've been using it lately just to actually help generate ideas. Like I'll spit out idea or sketch, and I say, hey, can you create a form or a color pattern that helps match the intentions of what I was looking for. And then still testing back and forth. The only thing that AI does, it makes you do things much more faster. It's because if you can imagine, I think, my book's coming out, it'll be like a 10-year book. I've been doing this for 15 years, and if you see all the amount of work that I've done, I've done a lot, in these last couple of years that if I sat there and 20 years ago and started building the Victor, I'd probably be done now, Whereas the Victor was done in 3 years, And that was during COVID, And so, I think technology, the way that we can, we still do traditional hand forging where we're melting metal and banging it like a Japanese sword and polishing it and grinding it and seam welding everything. But as we go to different things related to even like the projection mapping thing that we did here at the beacon, where you see it projected on the object itself, trying to create algorithms that create patterns and images that reflect kind of the mood or the inspiration that you're trying to do. But yeah, definitely AI is playing. Now, here's an interesting thing. So AI has actually affected me in a way where I might have to call Morgan and Morgan from the fact that they've taken the Victor, when I say they, the Nestle company, a bank, have actually made animations of my sculptures coming alive, and I was like, wait, that's kind of cool, but wait, I'm not getting any royalties from that, And so I finally got a cease and desist, and now another sculpture PR firm came to me, and they said they want to animate it like for a pharmaceutical company, like it's sneezing, But it's cool, and they showed me it, and I was like, wow, they actually could take my sculpture in real form and through AI actually animate it without me giving them the model, like traditionally the way you would do it, But it's just crazy to kind of see what AI can do. I think the way I was charging them on this, they're like, how much would you charge Tom Cruise, or what would his fee be to do that? So I think that was a way to figure out how I can start patenting and trademarking my sculpture so that, and that's the beauty of it. When people are seeing, and I see it in commercials, I see it in movies now, There was a filming of Jurassic Park, and they were going to film one of my pieces as part of the background. There was a talk about another Mission Impossible, kind of him. So instead of it going off Burj Khalifa, there's people are now looking at my sculptures as opportunities for engagement within Hollywood as well, which is really exciting.
That's fantastic. Well, best of luck with that. Let me ask you, I once talked to an artist who told me that there's two types of artists, and of course this is his opinion. This was a long time ago. He says there's artists who draw inspiration from role models and other artists that they look up to. And then there's the ones that everything comes from within. Do you agree? And if so, which side are you both?
I think there has to be a combination of both. I always believe there's never an original idea. It's just a variation on something that was started a long time ago. And a design is never finished. It's always an evolution of always continuing on to something next and new, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you have to be inspired by peers, but my peers are not necessarily other artists, they're actually other entrepreneurs. So I'll look at other architects, interior designers, fashion designers. If you've seen on here, I'm doing a lot of collaboration, so I'm coming out with my own cologne line. They're taking the box head, and that becomes a cap, like you see right here. Mm-hmm. So you can see how, one of my big influences was Virgil Abloh. So Virgil, if you don't know, he started, same with me, an architecture school in Chicago, started this brand called Off-White, became really close to Kanye, and then evolved, and whoever would think that when you were starting as an architect student, that you would be the lead designer to Louis Vuitton, right? So for me, I love the ideas with the tagline artist that I'm not doing things that are in physical form, but I could play in a space that involves how people live, right? How they dress, what they drive, And so I think that's the beauty of as a creator, is that sometimes you don't have to be put in a box of saying you're an architect and a baker. You could do all those things, right? And so for me, it's being inspired by a lot of other people, but then also having that instinct or that something within that's either personal, related to my heart disease, or something that is just intuitive, right? I think when people ask what my greatest gift is I think I don't need to sit on an idea for 20 days or 30 days, I'll get back to you. I have this sort of ability to come out with things like right on the spot. And I think for me, it's always about, when people say, hey, can you make three concepts? Your first concept is always going to be your best concept, right? The other two are just like, hey, you're just trying to please everybody else, or test ideas that you don't think were going to work, right? And so for me, it's always the idea and then maybe variations on that same idea, as I sort of evolve and look at things.